and hit play. I get sent to the language scene. Based on the button changes language. If I end prematurely and I hit play again, I get sent again to the language scene. I'm gonna choose Italian. You can see that now the main menu says an Italian text. And if I press, I go to the level, and we also have Italian here to our translated text. If I now close and play again, you see that I get sent immediately to the main menu. We skip the language scene, and the text is in Italian. Perfect! Hi, I'm Ricky. Today we're gonna see how to make a scene manager system in Unity. A scene manager is a class, usually the first one to load in our game, that decides which scene to load at first. For example, we can have a scene where the player can choose the language of the game, and next time the game starts, if a player has already chosen the language, we simply load the main menu first. And next time the game starts, instead of loading the choose language, we load directly the main menu, which is exactly what we're gonna do. Alright, so let's start by making the scenes that we're gonna use. One for the scene manager. It's a good habit to name it 00.sceneManager. Then we also want a scene for choosing the language and another scene for the main menu. Remember to always add a scene to our builder. So Ctrl-Shift-B. Let's just drag all the scenes in, and let's also add the one of the level that we've already done. I'm also gonna rename it and make sure they are in the right order. Scene manager first, then language, main menu, level. Here you can see the build index indicating their position. Let's open Scene Manager. We can delete everything that is inside, and I'm also gonna toggle off the gizmo. Perfect. We don't need a camera in here because we're only gonna use this scene to load another scene. So let's make a new game object and let's make our Scene Manager. We can actually call it Scene Manager because there's already a Unity class named like that. So let's make a My Scene Manager. In here on Awake, based on a certain parameter, we load a scene rather than another. That parameter is gonna be a pref value. So we use this string to save a player pref, and then based on that, if it's false, so if it's 0, we load the language scene, else we load the main menu. To load a scene in Unity, it's not super difficult, but the syntax is really weird. So let's make a new class to simplify that. Here in Unity, you can see that in the Scene Manager, I've put the My Scene Manager, but this new script doesn't need to be put in here. So let's just add it from here. I've called it Scene Functions. In here, let's just make for now one public static void function. First, we need to import the right library, Scene Management, and then we call Scene Manager, and this is the Unity Scene Manager, and in here we use load scene. Load scene takes either a string or an int, the string being the name of the scene, while the int being the build index of the scene. With this function, I want to change the scene by adding an index, just like I named the function with. So first we need to take the build index of the current scene. So here we get the current scene, and here we access the build index, and then to this we just add a parameter. Now it's true that we only have one static function in here, so we could make this class static, but let's actually keep it with mono behavior for now, and I'll show you why later. Let's go back to My Scene Manager, and in here we can call Scene Functions. You can see that this syntax is much easier than this one. We're also gonna call this function from elsewhere, and we're also gonna do it in-game in another scene, so trust me, we have a reason to make this class. Now we're actually done with Scene Functions and with My Scene Manager too. Let's go back to Unity. You can see that when I hit play, I get sent to the next scene, Choose Language. So let's go to Choose Language. I'm gonna go with a very neutral look. And for now, let's just make a simple button. And because in this scene we're gonna select a certain language, we want this button to first confirm the language and then load the main menu. So let's make a new empty game object. And here let's make a script that manages this scene particularly. In Choose Language Manager, we simply make a public void function that we then call from the confirm button. We're gonna worry about choosing a language and confirming it later. For now, let's just say that we have chosen a language, and so we save the pref that we've made in My Scene Manager. And after that, we load the main menu. Back to Unity. Let's link the button event. And before we test that, let's go to main menu. And in here, for now, let's just make a very simple button. Now remember when I said that sim functions should inherit from mono behavior? Here's why. Let's add sim functions to the scene. Here I've put it in manager. And now from the button, we can actually call a static function from a mono behavior object. Here it is. We just say 1, so we load the next scene. And I don't actually remember this being an option in previous Unity version, but apparently you can, at least now. And it's really nice, because this way we can have a class that does only static function, but the class itself can actually be instantiated, and that means that we can use button events. Alright, finally, to test all this, let's go to Sim Manager, hit play, and we are sent to choose language, we hit confirm, we are sent to main menu, we hit play, and we go to our level. If I close and start again, you can see that I'm directly sent to main menu. Perfect! So that's the main idea behind the Sim Manager. Of course, this is a very simple system, but it's actually just about that. If you want to extend on it, you just need to add some functionality to our My Sim Manager. In here, you simply add other values and other ways to check which values to look at. For example, if you have a lot of levels, you can save the level number and then loading that scene by the same number. But the main idea is just this. Alright, so now for the next part of the video, we're going to actually make the choose language scene. So let's go to choose language. In here, I'm going to make a button for the Italian language. Alright, I've also imported an Italian and then an English flag. And now we want this button to change the currently selected language, and then having the confirm button saving that language. So let's go back to choose language manager. And here, let's add a function to select a language. Language is a struct that we made in a previous episode, the one about localization. If you haven't watched that video already, do check it out now because you're not going to be able to follow through. Alright, so let's make a new value to hold this language selected. And another thing I want to do, which I think is very important, is making it so that the confirm button to go to the next scene can be pressed only if the player has chosen a language. This way the player won't just press the button immediately when it says confirm and go forward. So let's make a reference to the game object of the confirm button. And then we simply set it to true whenever we select a language. Now, a thing about this function is that we can't have an enum in a button. We could make another function with an overload and then parse in a string and then change it into an enum, but that is neither secure nor efficient. So let's go back to Unity. While we're here, let's also set the confirm button to false by default. And then in the button of the language, let's make a new script. In here, let's make a public function that is then gonna call the choose language manager. In here, we want a reference to the choose language manager, but we really don't need to make a singleton because it's only just one line of code. And because we are in a menu, we don't really care about the performance. So let's use findObject of type. And let's make a new serialized value to pass it in. Great, now back to Unity. In here, instead of calling the choose language manager directly, we call this function. And we don't need to pass a parameter through the button, we just change the value that is here. So in this case, we set it to Italian, and now we can just duplicate this button, and we just need to change the image and change the enum. And that's it. You can see that adding new languages is really simple. And now we need a way to actually change the language and show what is happening. So if you remember, we have a script called text changer, which we can add to a text to take that text and change the value based on the current language and a certain key holding the right translation. So in the confirm button, let's select the text, let's add text changer. We don't have a line for confirm, but for now let's just say confirm and worry about that later. Now in the manager, let's add the language manager script. Here it is. And in here, let's make the confirm key. While we are here, let's also add the reference to the confirm button. And now we just need a way to actually change the language, because right now in the language manager, things are a bit confusing. Language Manager is a script that actually does two things. One is getting the right translation, and the other is managing the current language. So let's split this script in two. Let's make a new script called Change Language Manager. Alright, before we do anything, let's go to New Language Manager, and in here let's get everything that has to do with changing a language. So from here, we take change language to, update all text, and switch language. We keep getLine, but we do take current language. Alright, now let's also add the library for enum. And that's good. Finally, in here, in the getLine function, in here we just need to read from the new Change Language Manager. But before we do that, if you notice all the things that we have in here, we can actually make static. So let's make them static. This way, much like with the sim function class, we can have this function accessible from anywhere. The same goes for current language, but the function can also be called from buttons. So now in the new language manager, we can just say change language manager.current language. Now in this change language manager, we already have a function called change language to that gets a string parameter and then changes the current language if that string can be translated to a language. We used to do that because we used to call this function from a button. But let's get a bit smarter and let's make an overload. If you don't know, an overload is a way to have multiple parameters from the same function. To make an overload is really simple. We just duplicate the function and change the parameter. In this case, we don't need to parse the value. We can just change the language directly. Now, a thing that you should do with working with overloads is having one true function that does all the work, while all the other functions just handle the parameter logic. So let's say that this function is the main one, and in here, where we parse the value from string, we call change language to. So in here, where we see if valid string, so we get the right enum, we just do this. And because we do that, we also don't need to call this. And this way, when we add functionality to the main function, we don't need to touch the other overload functions. In here we want to save the current language, so next time the game starts, we already have the language loaded. We also want to be able to change the language and save it separately. So let's add a new boolean parameter. And based on that, we call the player pref. So let's make a new pref value. Then we take this pref. Player prefs don't allow for enums, but they do allow strings. So let's save our language as a string. Finally, let's go back to the top and let's add an awake method. In here, based on the player pref, we change the current language. To do that, we need to parse the player pref value. So we're just gonna copy this code right here. Great, now we just need to put this change language manager somewhere in our scene. So back to Unity. Let's actually go to the scene manager, and in here, in our scene manager game object, let's add our change language manager. That's because change language manager needs to only run its awake method once. This way, first we're gonna do is load the language of the game. Let's go back to choose language, and let's go back to choose language manager. In here, in select a language, we want to change the language without saving it. In confirm language, we change the language, saving it. Alright, so let's go finally to Unity, and to show that it works, let's also go to main menu, and let's add a text changer to play. And let's add a language manager to translate that key. And in our level, I already have a couple of text changers in here. One is set to play, if I remember correctly, but I think that's about it for our system, so let's actually test it. Let's go back to the first scene manager, remember to clear the player prefs, and hit play. I get sent to the language scene. Based on the button changes language. If I end prematurely and I hit play again, I get sent again to the language scene. I'm gonna choose Italian. You can see that now the main menu says an Italian text. And if I press, I go to the level, and we also have Italian here to our translated text. If I now close and play again, you see that I get sent immediately to the main menu. We skip the language scene, and the text is in Italian. Perfect! Alright, so that's it for this video. Hope you learned something new. If you have any doubts about the code or any suggestion that you'd like me to see, do tell me in the comments. I have a GitHub repository of this project that is updated to the latest episode, link in the description. If you like this content, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.